welcome to today's X Talks webinar. Today's talk is entitled Passing an Audit, Pro Tips from a QA Expert Panel. My name is Sonia Hunt, and it's my pleasure to be your X Talks moderator for today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes. This presentation includes a Q&A session with our speakers. Now it's my pleasure to introduce you to your moderator for today's webinar, and she is Kelly Stanton, Director of Quality at Qualio. Kelly brings over 20 years of experience in both the pharmaceutical and medical device industries to the world of small startups and scalable quality system implementations. Having been an implementer, administrator, and user of many different EQMS tools on the market, she has built several quality systems and is an advisor to over 30 medical device and pharma companies. She is currently the Director of Quality at Qualio, helping customers and the company adhere to the evolving regulatory landscape. She leads a team of talented industry experienced quality professionals who work with companies in regulated industries on a daily basis. Now it's my pleasure to pass over the mic and the controls over to Kelly, so Kelly can introduce you to your panelists. So Kelly, when you're ready, you may begin.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to take a moment to introduce my colleagues and friends here on the panel today. I'll start off with Meg Sinclair. She's a Senior Quality Specialist on my team here at Qualio, and she is responsible for administration of our internal QMS, and she'll be speaking to us a little bit here later today. From MWA, I'd like to introduce Lisa Hellmans. She's the VP of Quality Services and Operations at MWA Consulting, as well as Paula Pilecki. I think I did that. Senior Director, Project and Audit Management with MWA Consulting. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. Hopefully we'll have some good information for you here on getting through audits. So today we're going to talk about how to prepare for and pass audits. We'll address some of these from an ISO perspective, but of course FDA, any other regulators out there are all very similar in their approach. Two quick polls, Sonia.
That is right. I'm going to do our first poll question, and the audience members should see it appear on their screens right now, and there it is. So this is a quick poll question. I'll give you about 40 seconds to complete this poll, and the question is, when is your next audit? So please select one of the below. This is done in real time, so your participation is strongly encouraged and very much appreciated, as I will be able to share the results with you once I close the polls. So the question again is, when is your next audit? We have within 3 months, 3 to 6 months, 6 to 12 months, or don't know. Please go ahead and cast your vote. And that looks like it's the majority of our audience have cast their votes. So thank you very much. I'll leave a few more seconds for those of you who have not, if you can do so now. Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating in that poll question. I'm now going to close the polls and share the results. Okay, so our first poll question was, when is your next audit? And we have 30% saying within 3 months, 18% are saying 3 to 6 months, 14% are saying 6 to 12 months, and we have a whopping 39% say they don't know. Before we go to our next poll question, what do you think about the results of that first poll question, ladies?
Lisa, how typical do you think that is from what we see?
I think it's pretty typical. Paula can speak to the scheduling piece of this, but we do have people who have their audit schedule set at the beginning of the year and they adhere to it, and then we generally have people at the end of the year who are trying to catch up. Paula has a lot more experience. It's like November through December is really busy for us.
Yeah, it's not unusual to have, especially right now coming out of the pandemic, folks are trying to scramble to get those dates on the books with their vendors. And it's difficult to do that within 3 months, but everyone is working to accommodate. So it's what I would have expected to see in that poll.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Excellent. Meg, I think with our customer audits and what we have coming up, feels about right.
Yes, similar trends there for us as well.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you. Sonia, next poll question.
Certainly, I will launch it right now, and here it is. Very simple poll question for this one. Does your company plan to continue using remote audits once COVID-19 restrictions end? So we have yes or no. So please go ahead and cast your vote, and I'll leave a few more seconds for those of you who have not, if you could do so now. Okay, I'll keep a couple more seconds there for you. Looks like everybody's now casting their votes. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, perfect. All right, now I'm going to close the polls and share the results with everyone. Oops, we got a couple more people. Sorry about that. few more seconds there for you. Okay, that looks like it's everyone. Okay, perfect. Thank you everyone for participating. I'm now going to close the polls and share the results. So the question was, does your company plan to continue using remote audits once COVID-19 restrictions end? And we have 58% are saying yes, while 42% are saying no. So thank you very much for participating in that poll question, everyone. Kelly, Lisa, Meg, and Paula, what do you think about the results of that poll question?
Paula, why don't you answer that?
No, it's just going to, again, not surprising. I think
Yeah.
the people who learned that they can actually successfully do remote audits, if it fits into their risk assessment, it really makes a difference. But if they really need to go on site and see with their eyes what's happening at a site, then they need to do that. If everyone got used to doing remote audits, it will be a good thing to have in their ability to do their audit scheduling.
Yep, I would agree with that. As a fully remote company and working with a lot of startups who are also primarily remote, I think it really just tipped the scale to make everybody a lot more comfortable with the idea that remote auditing really does work. And certainly Meg hosts a lot of our customer audits as well. And then we even recently hosted our entire 9001 audit remotely. So although the auditor did say he's planning to visit our headquarters in San Francisco, and we just keep smiling because we're not in San Francisco. So,
I do think it has a place in every company's audit plan, because when you have really good CMOs or CROs that you work with, you don't necessarily need to be on site, but you do want to check to make sure things are being done. So I think it'll continue to be a part of everybody's audit plans.
definitely. And I think it makes follow-up surveillance type audits, makes that a lot easier, I think, because you're right. In a manufacturing situation, there is no, you've got to see what's happening. Certainly for ongoing past that initial qualification audit, as long as your risk continues to remain stable with that organization and you're not seeing a lot of problems, then there's no reason to, in my opinion, to continue to show up. Awesome. All right. One of the things I skipped over quickly was, let's do a quick round table. Lisa, how many years have you worked in quality?
My early part of my career was in manufacturing.
Okay. Awesome. And Paula?
I've been working with MWA since 2006. So for the last 15 years, I've been working with clients on getting their project and audit schedules together. And that's about 15 years now.
Awesome. Meg, how about you?
10 years in quality in various industries, nonprofits, and healthcare, and then the last 3 years in medical device.
Thank you. All right, let's dive into our agenda. So today we'll spend a few minutes talking about what to do before your audit to get ready, scheduling included in those things, making sure the right people are available. We'll talk about what to do during your audit. We will do a brief product demo of Qualio, our EQMS tool, and we'll show you how we organized our ISO 9001 audit. And then after that, we'll talk a little bit about after the audit, and then we should have some time for questions and answers at the end. So do post questions in the chat box as we go along, and we'll be happy to try to address those questions. And of course, if not, there'll be contact information at the end. So before the audit, I know we all laugh. If you could quantify it, Lisa, how many audits do you think you've prepared for over your career?
Oh, a few dozen here and there. Some surprise and some not surprising, but yeah, it's definitely an interesting time when you're with a company who's going through an audit and preparing for it. Very interesting. Very stressful, but very interesting.
Definitely. Meg, how about yourself? How many audits you think?
Half a dozen now, maybe more. Seems like that doesn't even seem accurate. I feel like I've already done that many here, so probably more like it.
Okay. Yeah, and then with your device background, that was FDA and ISO?
FDA. Yeah.
Yep. Awesome. Paula?
Yeah, I come from a slightly different perspective because I'm actually working with the client to schedule their audits. So over the last 5 years, for example, we've scheduled over 450 audits, GMP, GLP, GCP, audit, inspection prep, MDSAP, all of those types. So my perspective comes from helping the client get ready internally so that they can select the right auditor and that they ask the site if they're actually really ready to be audited. And the client may have the idea to audit a site within a particular time frame. And so what they'll need to depend on is the fact that the site may not be ready for them. So I do a lot of that end of the.
Gotcha. Well, and that takes us nicely into my next question, which was, as an audit is approaching, what are the steps you take to prepare internally, working with the auditee? Anything you would add to that there, Paula?
I think that the last 15 months has taught all of us that you can't prepare for everything. And there's been a lot of adaptation happening in terms of, for example, you said, Kelly, that you can't see everything on a manufacturing floor, and yet 60% of our audits have been remote in the GMP arena. And when you're preparing for that, the number one thing I try to stress to clients is you have to be sure that the site is ready to accommodate that remote audit situation. So and it's not that different from an on-site situation, but the big issue is making sure that you're able to have the capacity to deal with the technology that's required. So you have to have your ducks in a row with your technology. You have to be sure that you're following your own SOPs when it comes to data integrity and data security. And that's becoming more and more of an issue. And a lot of people are really focused on that when they get ready for their audits. And in terms of a remote audit, of course, we all know it's always easier when everything is electronically based, but sometimes it isn't. And some companies actually have policies where they're not able to share documents outside of their own company. So you scheduled a one-day qualification audit, but half the day is taken up looking at documents. And to further stress out the situation, it may be that there's no technology support at the site that can actually facilitate that viewing. When the auditor has to look at things through a camera lens, it's much more difficult. So the main area of concentration is to make sure you're prepared in advance, make sure you have a checklist with the site to make sure that they're ready, and you want to be sure that they're able to engage when the time comes in an appropriate way. And I can't stress it enough, just like we got ready for this webinar today, you have to practice your technology in advance, and you have to have a backup plan.
Yep.
Definitely. Lisa, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I definitely think the technology piece is critical. If it doesn't work, you should have a backup plan for when it doesn't work. We've gotten into that. Have backup people who can take over just in case your technology. That happened to me in an audit where my Xfinity decided to do some work outside, and they took out our cable, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And luckily, our team was able to field the questions without me. So always have a backup ready just in case.
Yeah, I think that's the real takeaway too, is technology glitches happen, and we all know that. So if FDA is coming in, or your QP, or anyone who's coming into your site, they understand that these things can happen. But the real metal testing is that you've got a way to solve the problem. We're problem solvers. That's what we do. That's what you really want to focus on in those situations.
Definitely. Meg, how do you prepare?
To prepare, I always like to prepare the team and the rest of the company outside the quality team what to expect during an audit, how to conduct themselves during an audit. I think it's really important. There's always some people who think they need to pull a fast one, and it's really better to just be honest with your auditor and answer the questions honestly and stick to your procedures. So it's really important, I think, just to get everybody on the same page ahead of an audit.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Just because you're doing it remotely doesn't mean that those type of preparations, I think bigger organizations I've worked for in the past, we went through pre-audit training and those kinds of things. That stuff is still important even when you're remote. I would say maybe even more, because in addition to technology, as well, don't feel like you have to fill the space just 'cause it's quiet. Definitely.
I think that's the key point is the inspectors use that quiet time to get people to talk more. So definitely want to just answer questions as they come up, and don't try to volunteer, and understand that's a technique that they use. So be comfortable with the quiet.
Definitely. How should your QMS help you prepare for the audit?
From my perspective, it should help you pretty much prepare and work your way through the audit. It should obviously get all the different reports you're going to need from your QMS, deviations, CAPAs, and whatnot. But it also should assist you. Years ago, when we did audits with paper, everything was done with paper, and you'd have a runner going back and forth with questions. And now with the QMS, electronic QMS, the people in the back rooms can be seeing exactly what's going on. They can anticipate what's going to be needed and have it ready just like that. So I definitely think it should help you track the audit, track the findings, track the responses. There's all of that whole process that QMS can help you do today that we didn't have back then.
Definitely. Meg, any insight there on how the QMS helps us prepare?
I just echo what Lisa says. And then if you're preparing for a regulatory or a notified body audit, doing an internal audit yourself ahead of time is a really great tool to prepare. Know what you have, what cards you have in your hand before the auditor steps in is a great way to prepare.
The other thing I'd like to add is before any audit, and I think every company needs to be ready to have an inspection at any time. In the ideal world, we would all be inspection ready. You need to make sure you've identified your team who is going to be working with the inspectors, your SMEs, your runners, your scribes, and all of that. So that's something that you should maintain on an ongoing basis. And if you do that, then, and along with the training that goes along with preparation and document reviews and that kind of thing. But that's a key thing, is making sure that team is constantly updated as people come and go, and that people know their roles.
Definitely. Anything to add on there, Paula?
No, not that I can think of, other than the one takeaway that I would say in terms of remote auditing is to, and I've said this over and over again, don't wait until the last minute to ensure that the site is audit ready with the remote stuff. I've had situations where an auditor goes into the audit and found out, just a day or two before that they cannot access the necessary documents they need to look at, and that they have to wait that day. And I know I've said this before, but it is the number one takeaway I would say from the last 15 months, that clients and sites need to be very transparent about what they expect and what they're capable of doing. If a site policy maintains that they do not share documents in advance, then you may need to do a 2-day audit, not just a 1-day audit, that sort of thing. It's another I think people have thought, and you definitely save money on travel expenses with remote audit, but you need to not cut the time short. That document review and the back and forth it takes to get the documents could take a lot longer than one thinks. So be prepared, don't make assumptions, and make sure that the site is ready to provide that documentation however you need it in order to have a successful audit.
Definitely. All right. So we've prepared, we're well prepared. So during our audit, what are some of the ways you've communicated with auditors throughout an audit? If obviously face-to-face is one scenario, but in this world where we're remote auditing and we're all talking to each other on webinars or Zoom, let's talk a little bit about communication with our auditors.
Obviously, if you're on Zoom, you're talking to them directly. If you have questions that are unclear, you can, email them and have them respond. But with Zoom, it's almost like you're just talking to somebody in a room. The only drawback is that you really can't see some of the body language that you could normally see when you're face-to-face. So that sometimes the inspectors are really good at having a poker face, but you can see if they're getting irritated in other ways, if they're grabbing their chair or doing some other thing that makes you see that, okay, they're being pleasant, but they're really getting irritated. If a document wasn't brought to them as quickly as they needed it, if people are getting argumentative and that kind of thing. So I think that's the one thing we lose with the remote audits in communicating with the inspectors. In general, it's what the tool we have in this day and age, and I think it works relatively well most of the time.
Yeah. Meg, you want to talk a little bit about communicating with our auditor?
Sure. I believe most of it was via email. You would ask our questions. These are the things I want to see for tomorrow. I don't remember us needing a ton of Zoom calls because we used our system and email to answer what we needed. So there wasn't a ton of additional meetings, Kelly, on Zoom with our auditor. So that was really nice. And then when we did need to hop on, we were able to on Zoom.
Yeah. What tips can you share with the audience on keeping communication clear and open?
From my perspective, you just don't be afraid to ask the inspector to repeat questions. If you're not clear on the question, I think some of us get intimidated and might think we sound, like we don't know what we're doing, but sometimes you just don't hear the question properly and you just need time to think about what the answer is, and asking them to repeat it helps you get a little bit more time to prepare your answer. And then the other thing is really important is really try to anticipate some of the questions by having people in the ready room, in the back room, monitor the conversations and request for the documents. I think that's another way that we can have better communication, because then again, they would have the information they need to provide the SMEs and prep the SMEs as needed.
Yeah. Meg or Paula, any further commentary on that one?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. All right, so what are your thoughts on giving auditors direct access to the platform versus not?
I don't think you should. I think it opens the inspector up to digging a little deeper. That's never been a policy that I've seen at any company where they allow the inspectors in. It gives you more control of your audit because you're the one giving the documents versus once you give access to somebody, they're going to dig, and you just don't want that. So I think it's a risk if you give them access to your system, other than here are the documents and you can look at the documents that way. But other than that, I wouldn't give them access.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Well, and I think we're on the other side of that fence, but we have the ability to limit which documents we give them. Yeah, so Meg, if you want to talk a little bit about, and we'll show this in our demo, how we set that up to facilitate it. So we're not doing document review on Zoom the day of the audit.
That would be that if you have a way of doing that and avoiding that situation and making the whole process much more efficient, and you have all the data privacy issues covered, then that could be very useful for sure.
With our 9001 auditor, we gave him direct access to our system, but we limited that with the use of tags and groups so that he was only able to see procedures. And then anything that was in the system that I wanted him to be able to view, like a non-conformance, without actually opening that event, I could export and share with him that way. So there was some good ways to control the access to the information with while keeping him in the system and being able to go from procedure to procedure. And then the permissions would allow, if he wasn't able to see something, then that was something I could share.
Yeah, and that really sped up the whole process. We manage our customer audits that way as well. Here's our SOPs and our policies. When we meet with you, let's talk about questions, and we'll show you any CAPA's non-conformance or objective evidence that you need to see. So we have found that to be pretty handy.
That'll be especially good for smaller shops to know about, because I think the big worry is, are there enough hands on deck to manage all of that? So do you have that person on your side who is trained and able to do that in a proper way? That will be a good question to have answered.
Yeah, definitely. And then we can limit, of course, anything that might be more sensitive to, here, we'll show you this. We don't necessarily send them those records, but just that initial SOP review that they've got to do anyway. Yeah, we do try to facilitate that. Obviously, this is where having an electronic QMS is a big advantage, definitely. And so I guess we've talked about the last question then. How should your QMS help you organize that communication? I suppose having some of those things available and then deciding what records are or are not available.
And I guess the other thing I would stress is that when they do request documents from you, make sure that you have a system in place where you're giving them in PDF, that format that's locked, that's secure. So make sure at the end when they're leaving and they say they want to take some of your documents for their reports, make sure you give them in the right form.
Yeah, definitely. All right. From here, Meg, are you ready to fire up Qualio and talk about going through our ISO 9000 audit for a few minutes?
Sure. So I wanted to share with you all today our quality record we put together for our our 9001 audit. So for the stage 1, our auditor had sent over a list of objective evidence he requested, and we created a table of all his requests and then linked or attached the items for his reference. Things like our satisfaction surveys we had conducted, our internal audit report was linked here. So that would be available to the auditor. And then we would also have examples of the training matrix to support competency, employee files. I use myself because I don't mind. And then internal audit procedures. So all of these things can be attached here or linked. So we have smart links. So our employee file, training records. This was exported and shared with the auditor as well. This is what we shared at stage 1. And then at stage 2, we were able to come in and update things as we needed to. So if we needed to update our headcount, because we did grow between our 2 audits, we could do that. And we were also able to attach records. If I wanted to show him a non-conformance, I could export it if it didn't have any confidential information and just attach it here to the record for him.
This is also how we managed that inventory list of everything that the auditor was given. So once we were in our stage 2 audit, when he would ask us for further information, we would create those documents, send them via email, and then everything was attached here. So that typical log that we all keep in the back room of everything that we sent in,
Nice.
is all right here on this file.
Very easy reference. So that was before and during the audit. And then after the audit, we used our own events and to manage our nonconformances, which actually we didn't have any. We had no findings from one audit. So this is actually from our internal audit that we did in preparation for our 9001 audit. And I believe a lot of the work that we did in our internal audit resulted in us having no findings because we knew the cards that we had in our hand and the work that we needed to do ahead of time. So we were able to use the nonconformance form. These can be built to suit your needs. We have the initiation, investigation, and root cause, solutions and actions. All the actions we took, we created employee files. We had a work instruction for creating those. We met with all the department heads and then got all of those files established. And that's an ongoing thing as we continue to grow. And then we have the implementation. And then, of course, for all the events, we have a verification of effectiveness.
Nice system.
Anything else? Yeah, it's a great system. It's
It is.
been very great. It's made remote auditing very easy for, as a remote auditor and as an auditee, it's been beneficial for both.
Nice.
Great.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we do use this approach with our customer audits. Obviously, we don't make the entirety of these records available to them. We generally just start with our SOPs, policies, etc. And then we usually schedule 2 to 3 hours at the most has been about what the time has been needed at the end because they're able to see everything in the policies they want to see. So then we show them and places where we can stage, like here's an example of a training set of records, and we usually send one of our own to that. But if they want to see somebody else, we'll ask them for that in advance if possible. And then we can spend most of our time, just answering any questions they have or digging deeper into any particular topics that they want at the time of audit. So
I can hand it back to Sonia for our next poll question.
Thank you very much. Yes, I will take back the controls and we will do our last poll question. And I will launch that poll question now. So audience members, you should see it appear in front of your screen right now. And there it is. So the question that we have for you for this final poll question is, what type of QMS system do you have? So there's a couple to select from the below. So please go ahead and choose it. Just like our other poll questions, this is done in real time. So I'll give you about 30 seconds to complete this poll question. And the options that you have are paper only, paper and digital only, or no QMS in place. Okay, that looks like it's the majority of our audience have cast their votes. So thank you very much, everyone. I am now going to close the polls. Okay, so let's take a look at the results. So the results are here. What type of QMS system do you have? And we have 14% of our audience members are saying paper only, 42% are saying paper and digital, then we have 35% saying digital only, and then 9% saying no QMS in place. So thank you everyone for participating in that poll question. Lisa, Meg, Kelly, and Paula, as usual, what do you think about the results of this last poll question?
I think it's encouraging that people are moving more towards the electronic systems. In this day and age, it's so much easier to manage your documents with a good system like Qualio. I've done two paper-based startups in my career, and I'm telling you, we spend more time chasing paper than we do actually doing quality work. So this kind of solution allows people to really focus on the important issues like continuous improvement, making sure your CAPAs are being followed through and in a timely manner, doing your deviation investigations, etc. So I do think this is a great tool to use, and I wish I would have had something like this back then.
Yep, I would agree with that one as well. I've done quite a few systems over the years, and even a paper hybrid type system. You've got some electronic files, but you still end up chasing signatures around and not being able to find things. You end up having to have an army of people whose whole job is just to chase the documents around. And in the small startup space, that's just not efficient at all.
No,
it's not a good use of resources. Awesome. All right. So after the audit, I think Meg mentioned we didn't have any findings in our 9001 audit to address, but we certainly had other things we were still working through at the time. And Lisa, Paula, speaking to audit findings and how you go about addressing those?
Well, you have to take any inspection, any audit as a continuous improvement activity. And you want to hopefully know your vulnerabilities before going into the audit, but sometimes you don't. Sometimes they find something that is just you're blind to. And you just want to thank them for pointing it out and reassure them that you really want to have a good quality culture and that you're committed to resolving it. So I think that's really important. And if you can fix some of the findings they may have are fixable before they even leave, do it. That shows that you really are serious about your quality.
Definitely. Meg, Paula, anything to add? Nothing to.
I would just say when you report those back to management review, to just frame it as that continuous improvement, opportunities for us to keep growing and improving our quality management system.
I have to say, I did see, was it 2 weeks ago on LinkedIn, and it's been around, but it just struck me how you look at a jar full of pennies and quarters, the quality budget before a 483 or a warning letter, and then really big afterwards. I think if people could just reverse that, they wouldn't have a lot of problems to resolve. So it really is called that preventative measures that people take. And if young companies, in my opinion, get used to putting in those systems in place sooner than later, they can avoid a lot of heartache, and it'll be cheaper in the long run. But it's hard to explain that to people when small budgets and whatnot. But it's one of those things that if you can do it right the first time and you do it in a phase appropriate manner, you're so much better off as your company progresses.
Definitely agree with that one. And I have had to have that conversation many times in the startup space. So Meg, I guess we could talk about how we operationalized addressing findings with our team. I think you showed us our NCR process. If you'd like to speak to that for a minute.
Sure, we make those action items and those usually get spread out to the relevant departments. So if we had findings for our engineering team, those were spread to engineering for them to address. And then we work through those findings in the NCR or CAPA process. We report them back in management review, which we're doing biannually now. So it stays on everyone's radar until they're resolved.
Awesome, thank you. And how should the QMS help organize the post-audit activities?
Again, working through those NCRs, I think really keeps that operationalized and organized.
Also just sending out reminders for critical due dates and those types of things are really helpful. People are busy, so if you get electronic reminders that this is due on such and such a date every couple of days, it keeps it on your priority list.
Well, and I think something else that's important to mention here too, that both of you mentioned earlier, is that these findings aren't going on the front page of the New York Times, and they're not a death sentence. These are opportunities to improve your quality system. And I think it goes a long way because the next time the auditor comes, they see that you've addressed the findings from last time. They're right here visible in the quality system. They were escalated all the way up in management review. But that's a good opportunity to take credit for the work you're doing anyway and demonstrate the completeness of your QMS and how it really is touching all the important business processes in your organization.
Yeah. And to be proactive, I'd say too, if you have any suggestions from your auditor, you can always make those preventative actions and work those as well. That is a great effort to be proactive.
Yeah, that is one absolutely underutilized aspect of a quality system is preventive action for sure. I can't, how many times I've had auditors comment on, well, I can see you made these changes, but you really ought to capture this. Give yourselves credit for the continuous improvement side of the quality system. I think, I don't know if you've seen a trend, Lisa, and it's been a little bit since I've been in front of an FDA auditor, but at least in my experience with ISO auditors, they're more collaborative. They want to see you succeed.
Yeah, I think it's to everyone's benefit for companies to succeed. The FDA is charged with making sure that we make safe and effective drugs, and it's to everybody's benefit. And so if you look at them as your partner and instead of your enemy, I think it's become more collaborative. I think it's much better. And that's why even when I do my training for pre-approval prep, I change it from a war room to a ready room. I took that from Star Trek. I kind of like that, the ready room. And we're ready. It's a more positive way of approaching an inspection that, yes, we are ready, we're in control, versus the war room, just the words that you use get everybody on edge. It's the war room. So just the way you frame and prepare your people to go through an inspection makes a difference in the terminology that you use. Again, you don't want to give the baby away with the bathwater, but you do want to be as honest as you can and know your vulnerabilities and speak to those vulnerabilities and have a plan to address them. If you have all of that before you go into the audit, you're halfway there, 3/4 of the way there.
Definitely. Yeah, it's always an advantage to have an auditor mention something that they're starting to find, and they start to open that box a little bit, and you go, oh, let me show you my CAPA for that issue.
Absolutely.
And here's where we are. Yeah, so that gains you a lot of brownie points right there. Oh, you already knew about this. Great. It's the ones that the auditor discovers that you didn't know about.
But again, you look at that as, oh my goodness, we didn't. Thank you for pointing that out, and we'll definitely be working on that one. So yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fresh sets of eyes are always important.
Absolutely. And that's why you do a lot of the pre-audit prep. You do the training, you make sure you go through your documents, you do mock inspections, you do internal audits, you do all of that before the audit. And that's when you know they're coming. But that should be some part of your continuous process as you're going through your day-to-day. And that's what people tend to forget. It's okay, we're done with that audit, especially when on the commercial side, not so much on the clinical side because you tend to know when they're coming, but on the commercial side, boy, it's tough because sometimes things happen and they'll just surprise you. And what do? So you have to be inspection ready. And if you operationalize that within your company, even small companies can do that. And just make sure quarterly you reiterate certain things. You don't have to do the full training, but make sure everybody's looking at their documents and things are in place just in case, because you never know.
Absolutely. All right. Last question. Once your findings are addressed, how should you work with the auditor to gain your certification?
Obviously, prompt response to any of their requests and just keeping the communication open.
All right. At this point, I believe we have covered all the topics. Sonia, I believe you've been collecting questions for our panel.
Yes, I have. Let me first get us to our page here. Okay, there we go. Okay, hi, everyone. Here I am, put on my webcam. And yes, I have been busy in the background here getting all the questions coming in from our audience members. And we're going to try our best to address all these questions within the time that we have. So let me first remind our audience members, if you do have questions, please send them through the questions window, and we'll try to attend to your questions during this time together. For right now, let me start with the questions that I've already received. So Paula, Lisa, Meg, and Kelly, firstly, I'd like to say thank you for that great insightful presentation and conversation, and Meg for the demonstration. So thank you very much for that. All right, here is our first question. Let me just find it here. Okay, what steps can be taken to ensure compliance with RA and GMP guidelines, as most firms have designed their own interface, which can have an issue, especially in respect to validation and documentation? Who would like to answer this first question? Not all at once, please. Kelly, who are you going to send this to?
I'm going to send this one to Lisa.
Oh my goodness, can you repeat the question again?
Sure, it was a little lengthy. Okay, so the question is, what steps can be taken to ensure compliance with RA and GMP guidelines, as most firms have designed their own interface, which can have an issue, especially in respect to validation and documentation?
You need to clarify with your your inspector, what types of systems they're using. And if you've done your own internal system, yeah, definitely going to want to have somebody come in and take a look at it, make sure it's really up to date, have that system audited, make sure that you have the validation documents all in oh my gosh, all in, that they're complete and that they're available. So that's tough. That's a tough one. Definitely have somebody come in and look at it before your inspection.
Okay. Yeah. Anyone else like to add to that, or should I go to the next question?
No, I think that's exactly right. You need to have somebody come in and take a look at what you've designed and make sure it's compliant. No way around that.
Okay, thank you. Here's our next question. This audience member is asking, what are the differences between clinical audits, quality audits, and inspection?
Okay, yeah, so clinical audits and quality audits and inspections, they're all looking at different pieces of the same, of the pie, really. Like a clinical audit, depending on what you're auditing, whether it's a clinical site or a CRO, you might focus on some slightly different things, but really they're just looking at different pieces of the pie. Does that answer your question, Meg or Kelly? Do you want to add to that?
I think you covered it there. Yeah.
Yeah, you did. An inspection will be much, probably more a deeper dive. Clinical audit is a fairly standard fare. If you're going in to look at a site, and the quality audit is, in a sense, it's always a part of a clinical audit, isn't it? You're always looking at the QMS. That's a standard part of every audit.
Exactly.
inspection, you're going to want to really up your game, make sure everything that we've talked about today is in place.
Okay, thank you very much for that. This question here, this audience member is proposing a situation. So here's the
Mhm.
situation they're proposing. A company was led by one person for the whole QMS and all other departments. So the employees never was involved in the audits. How can I prepare employees that have never been involved in audits so they are not nervous or if they don't know what to say or do?
That's
Yes.
probably a pretty common scenario. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
it is. Every company, even small companies, ought to prepare everybody for an inspection. Sometimes with a small company, you're the only QA person. I've been in that situation, but I always made it. I went through the pre-approval inspection training with everyone, just in case. You just never know. And it does help people to know what to do and what not to do during an audit. Those do's and don'ts are critical. But it's not just going through the class, it's really practicing. And that's the piece that people forget about. Because it's easy to read and go through a training, but if you don't internalize some of those things, that's the hard part. And that doesn't, then you still are nervous. But if you get people in a room and the training is really thorough and they get to practice, I'm the inspector and I'm asking these questions, and you can get them to be a little more comfortable with the different types of questions that are asked and so on. So we offer training classes on that as well. But I think even a small company should prepare all of their folks. I worked for 5 and 10 people companies, and I prepared them. It's just a good way so that they know.
Yeah, and to your point, bringing in another person can be extremely helpful to the sole QA person.
Exactly.
Because you need that, it's always like the messenger is better received sometimes. But it also gives you a team member to work with. You need that backup. So brings more energy to the table. And again, that goes to budgeting. You really need to budget that in advance as part of your plan.
Okay, thank you very much, ladies. Here's our next question. I'm going to try to squeeze in a couple more here with the time that we have. This audience member is asking, do you recommend another electronic trial master file tool, or is Qualio your only tool for clinical trials?
I'll take that one, and it really depends on whether or not you're outsourcing. I would say if you're working with a contract research organization, I would leverage their tool. There's no reason to duplicate that information. Certainly, in as much as any clinical trial exercise is a giant exercise in document control, there are pieces of that you will want to manage on your side, depending on what bits of it that you have outsourced. If you are running trials yourself, Qualio is really geared to be a quality system tool, and there are tools out there that are really geared and programmed to be good trial master file management tools.
Okay, thank you very much. Here's our next question. It's a little lengthy, so let me get ready for it. Here we go. What measures should be taken to minimize deviation as during audit prep? A lot of gaps are identified and most of them are managed, but still some remain. How can this issue be dealt, as it causes a lot of panic during audit and post-audit review? And if you can apply that same scenario with a CAPA as well.
So I think as you prepare for the audit, you just have a plan. Again, I think this is pointing to, if you have some gaps, to prepare, even if you can't fix it before the inspection, but to have a plan that this is my plan of attack. I'm going to do, and some commitments, some date commitments. I think that really helps put the inspectors at ease that you are aware and that you are currently working on it. And the same thing for CAPAs. Deviations happen. They will never not happen. We're humans. As long as we have humans, they're going to have deviations. But it's how you handle the deviations. And do you have a backlog of deviations? Do you have a backlog of CAPAs? That's not going to bode well. But if you are on top of it and you have a plan and you're moving forward, that's one of the ways to hopefully avoid any findings. That's right. Yep, exactly.
I'm going to squeeze in one last question. Here it is. What do you need to have in place, procedures, quality manual, systems up, prior to an ISO audit or to get ready for a potential FDA inspection? This audience member is asking. Who would like to tackle that one?
You want another webinar on that one?
That's the flip answer. The real answer is you need to have as much of your quality system in place as supports where you are in your development process. If you are commercial and you are distributing product, you better have a complete system.
Yes.
If you're in design still, if you're in product development, whether you're on pharma or device, there are pieces of the system that
Mhm.
you may not be doing just yet, and that would be okay. The other difference there being at ISO and FDA, if you're going after ISO certification, you will have to have all the pieces of your quality system in place. Whether or not you're using something
Mhm.
like
Right.
complaints, for example, you
Right.
wouldn't be yet, but they'll still expect to see that you are ready for it when it gets
Right.
there. So you have an SOP and a workflow built to handle those.
Absolutely, I agree with that. It is one of those things where if you prepare and you have a plan, even if a phase two, if you're in phase two, you say at phase three we're going to have X, Y, and Z in place, and just have that plan and stick to it. You'll be in much better shape.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Meg, did you want to add anything?
I would just say it never hurts to do your internal audit or management review ahead of
Absolutely.
time too. So.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Mhm.
definitely.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for those questions. We have reached the end of the Q&A portion of the webinar. If we couldn't attend to your questions, and there's quite a number of them there, the team at Qualio will follow up with you after this presentation. And if you have any further questions, I'm going to show you some email addresses. So there's one here for Paula, one for Lisa, and if you're trying to reach Qualio, please direct them to yuri.com@qualio.com. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating in today's webinar. You will be receiving a follow-up email from X-Talks with access to the recorded archive for this event. A survey window will be popping up on your screen. Your participation is strongly encouraged and appreciated as it will help us to improve on our further webinars. Now, I'm about to send you a link in your chat box in a few seconds. You'll be able to view the recording of this event at that link and also share this link with your colleagues when they register for the recording as well. So I encourage you to do that. And get even more out of today's presentation by downloading the supporting materials that are available under the handouts tab. And we have one there for you, a PDF of Qualio plus quality as a service. So please go ahead and check that out. Now, please join us in thanking our speakers, Paula, Lisa, Meg, and Kelly, for that very insightful presentation and discussion, and Meg for the demo. So thank you very much, ladies.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We hope you found this webinar informative. It has been my pleasure to be your webinar moderator. On behalf of the team here at X-Talks, we thank you for joining us. I'm Sonia Hunt. Until next time, please take care and bye for now. Bye, everyone. Thank you.